So to begin our series on the makkot, we're going to focus first on the plague of dam, of blood. So here we are at the Hempstead State Park, at the Hempstead Lake, which is actually the largest lake in Nassau County of 167 acres. Now let's try to think about the makkot of dam. The first thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does is he affects the water of Egypt, and he turns that water into blood, which leads us to a few questions. Why the water? Why blood? How do we put this all together? So let's think about this from a few angles. There's a famous Medrash Tanchuma which says in Parashas Bo the fascinating observation that perhaps we should understand the 10 makkos as an expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's attack on Egypt, almost as if Hashem is besieging Egypt. Now when you besiege a city, the first thing you do is you attack the water supply. Without water, it's a matter of days, if not weeks, before that city is going to have to capitulate and surrender. The first thing Hashem does is he affects and he takes over the water. That's the first thing that's going to affect everybody. And it's not just the water of the Nile, it's the water of all the different waters, says Rabbi Nehemiah, in all of Egypt, as understood by the Psukim. That's perhaps our observation number one. But then it goes a little further. If you actually look at the Psukim in Parashas Va'era, it describes that there is more of an effect than simply the water. The Psukim say, "V'adagar asher ba'ya'ar mesa." The fish in the water actually dies. V'yiv'ash ha'ya'ar, and everything is dying, everything is rotting, everything is coming apart. Now we take a look at this. This is a very small lake, relatively speaking, but even this small enclosure, which is a preservation over here in Nassau County, in the state of New York, as an example, is the host to many types of different fish for fishing naturally, or those which are actually brought in to this particular lake. This lake is 167 acres, being the largest in our county. But if you think about it, when you look at the Nile ranges, just to look at the facts as recorded in National Geographics, is 4,100 miles long, crossing through 11 countries, being the longest river in the world. In fact, the Nile River is as of today, 95% of the population of Egypt lives within a few kilometers of the Nile banks itself, just to get a sense of how life-giving it is. It has over 30 species of snakes, over 100 different species of fish life, which are supported by the Nile River. When we talk about the Nile being impacted, we're not just talking about the Nile. We're talking about all the surrounding, all the canals, all the irrigation, all the farmland, the food, not just the water supply. This was a very impactful attack on the nation of Egypt. But let's take it one step further. We should also understand that certainly in the Middle East at this time, pagan idol worship is rife. And one of the things that the nations of the world would serve at those times were the powers, whether it be the wind god, the sun god, and the God which gives, or the power that gives the most to that society. And that's why in Egypt, if you look through the ancient Egyptian pantheon, there are numerous gods related to the Nile, whether it be the Nile silt as it recedes and provides the irrigation, whether it be the gods who are born through the river. There are so many gods related to the Nile River because it was the epicenter of Egyptian culture. And therefore, the attack over here was not even militarily on the impact on society, on the impact on wildlife, the impact on the food supply, but it was also the impact spiritually on the fact that this was to be seen as now an attack of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on this central power, perhaps the most central power in Egypt at the time. 3 different perspectives of the attack on the river. Where it's first the besieging of Egypt, where it's the collateral impact on societal norms around, or even the spiritual attack on the God of Egypt, the epicenter of what Egypt stands for. Which leads us to a fascinating question, and that is, why blood? So if it's going to be attacked, so dry it up, dam it in some way that the water's not going to reach the Egyptians further down towards Sudan, Ethiopia. But why is it that the river had to turn to blood? So there's a lot of interesting perspectives to think about, and that is that when you look at the human being, we know famously the human being is 60% water themselves. Isn't that interesting? Which means to say that it's almost as if what the river turning into blood is almost a sign not so much about the water but about the blood. You human beings, you Egyptians, think you understand how the human being works. You think you understand the systems of life. You can manipulate them. You're in control of them. You yourself, Pharaoh, are a deity. Well, understand that even your blood is mostly based on water. God's giving you the life. You sometimes look so shallowly at it yourself, at the organisms, at the mechanisms in life, you don't understand the structures behind the systems. In fact, the word for human being is Adam, which essentially is an aleph in front of the word dam, blood. You are based on blood. You're a system of blood which requires, your body requires oxygen all the time, which is carried in that blood. And that's what the aleph, Hashem's at the beginning of all of that, because you need to see the water behind the blood. It's almost a humbling lesson that the nation of Egypt, and perhaps vicariously the rest of the world, in Israel included, are learning, is where does your blood come from? It comes from the water. So blood perhaps over here is seen as a sign of life. Where does life come from? It comes from the water. Seeing it backwards is one perspective. However, there's another, and perhaps I would say perhaps more eerie, more scary perspective of that. And that is that if we put ourselves back in the Egyptians' shoes for a moment, the Egyptians were a nation in which ordinary people had become murderers. If you think, fast forward to Germany in the late 30s and 40s, where Hitler's ordinary executioners, regular people, suddenly became mass murderers. Just with enough propaganda, just with enough convincing of what evil is, this other nation. The same thing happened in Egypt. And you had police forces sending children and throwing those babies into the river. You had people rooting out others who are hiding babies to throw their children into the river. And where was all this infanticide? Where was this massacre hidden? Where were the corpses buried? They were buried in the Nile River. When those people suddenly start seeing the red rising to the surface of that river, what's the first thing that goes through any Egyptian mind at that point in time? Wow, it's known. What guilt do we bear on what we did? We thought nobody would ever know about it. It's a large, vast, deep river, and the blood comes up. The blood that you spilled, O Egyptians. So yes, let's recap for a second. Why the river? The river is the source of life. It's the collateral damage on every aspect of the economy around them. It's their deity. Why blood? Because perhaps we're looking back. Where does the blood come from? Where's the water, the life source? Where's the God, the aleph in front of the dam? And also the message the Egyptians are understanding is the blood that we put into that water. These are perhaps some perspectives with which we can understand this first and crucial step of Makkas dam. Have a wonderful and meaningful day, and a Chag Kasher v'Sameach.